Let's see if they've got scores yet. 0 out of 0. It's round 1. Welcome everybody to the greatest chess tournament of the year, perhaps. The only other tournament that I think might give it some competition would be the Olympiad. I think there's going to be an Olympiad this year. But this is going to be one of the top 1 or 2 tournaments in the world this year, I think. Look at this madness position. White king in the middle, black pawn on e4. Immediately I like Nodirbek's position, but I haven't even counted pieces yet. Rooks weirdly stuffed in here, especially the one on h1 is stuffed in by the one on g1. Let's make sure that you can actually see the board. Let's get into this. You can't even see the stuffed rooks. There they are. Look at them. Not looking too happy, are they? Those rooks. All right. Let's move this over here. And let's just improve our layout a tiny bit here. D5, trying to blow open that king with the b5 pawn just hanging. It's an unusual looking position, right? Immediately we get something new and different and glorious here. All right, let's count the pieces. Nodirbek has sacked a piece. Okay, it's important to count the pieces. He's sacked a piece. So he needs to get quite a bit out of this white king on d2. Pawn-wise, he technically has 2 pawns for the piece, but with 2 pawns hanging and the piece being a bishop that's part of a bishop pair, 1, 2, even 3 pawns won't be enough unless he really gets this king or gets some, wins at least an exchange or something in the chase. So he's super committed here. Let me just quickly go to Twitter and announce that we're live for this. All right, I've tweeted. Woo! And Levon has grabbed a pawn while I was tweeting. Knight takes b5. Wow. D takes c4, bishop takes c4. I mean, you want to open this file as Nodirbek, but you can't use the file too well if you're losing your pieces. Queen b2 looks logical, like the knight was trying to stop queen b2. Other things to notice, this knight move is intended to put the bishop here. He's trying to keep the king from getting off of these 2 dual files, right? So, because you could play a move like king h8, preparing dc4. You could play rook d8, preparing dc4. The king would dodge. Whenever you take on c4, bishop c4, bishop d4, there's no good place for the king to go. So that's what the knight's doing. But queen b2 looks really powerful. I guess he's going to have to look at it carefully. The king's gonna have to come here, and then he's worrying about this move coming in next somehow. Yes, finally, Freestyle GOAT chess. For anyone who doesn't know what it is, it's chess 960. Let's go to move 1 and just see. Whoa, that king was on the run from move 3 or something. What is going on? Let me call up some more info about the event since we're just getting going here. I think today they're playing Rapid. Yeah, Rapid Chess. Let's click on one of the games that's done. How did Gukesh do? He lost. Ow. Oof. Let's see if we can find out what the time control is for Rapid. 25, and it looks like they're getting 15 seconds per move easily. Okay. Let's just put in that information here. I mean, nobody ever, well, it feels like not that many people ever read the information. Plus about 15 seconds per move. Okay, we don't yet know for sure if I've got the time control right. BPOW thinks 25 plus 10. All right, I'll trust BPOW over my eyes. 25 plus 10. I beat them in 5 seconds. Life can be so nice. Glad to hear it. I am confident that there's nobody. No, you can never know. There's so many people in the world. I am one of the most excited commentators for this event. So, I've been waiting for this. I'm glad you're here with me. Thank you, Spaglotti. Everything about the tournament is great except the name. Yeah, well, I don't know how they came up with this name. The name is so mysterious. You like hear the name of the event and you're just, I don't know what this event is about, or what it is, or who it is, or anything, right? But here I've put some information for someone to maybe read. It's Chess 960. We're on Rapid Day 2. Tomorrow there's going to be we're on Rapid Day 1. Tomorrow's Rapid Day 2. And then they've got knockout matches at a classical time control. Okay? For the Rapid Chess today and tomorrow, it's 25 plus 10. I think they're probably going to get in like 7 rounds of Rapid Chess or something like that to figure out the standings and stuff. I don't yet know all the details. Is the schedule going to tell us? No. Is home going to tell us? Schedule format. Let's go to format because it's kind of complicated. Round robin. Okay, so they will play 7 rounds against each other of 25 plus 10. All right, I was right. And then after that, it's knockout matches, 2 games classical. They were trying to make it more accessible to the general public. So they thought people who know much less about chess than me would understand the name of their event. Freestyle might be a better name. It might be. Who knows? Rook d8 from Nodierbeck, not queen b2. And now deep thought. This move aims at pushing d4. I guess the key position to consider here is something like bishop d4, pawn takes c4, king here, right? And then what's the plan? Oh, that's the plan. He takes, plays knight d5 check, pushes the king back here, and then gets back to mating him. There was no way for the king to go through. The whole f file was blocked, right? So the king couldn't actually run. So after rook d8, bishop d4 takes c4, he's going to be in some trouble. He could try going the other direction, like this, right? We could try the same line. Boom, boom, boom. The king, he can't give up the knight. If he retreats and gives up the knight, then black's only down in exchange, plus also still probably mating him. I mean, where does he go to be safe, right? If you go to c2, knight e3 wins the queen. If you go to b2, they take the knight with check, and you still have to find a square for the king. So let's assume he goes here. Knight e3. GG. I was wondering if there was going to be a mate here, here, here. What do you guys think? Odds of mate? What's the probability right here? King here, checkmate a 1. King here. You have to predict before I actually find the checkmate. Once I've got checkmate on the board, you can't. All right, Wired Retro wins the minigame. It was 100% chance of checkmate. All right, so yeah, so you could play knight e3 and take the queen, or you could play rook c7 and probably checkmate this king as it runs over here, right? Something like that. Woo! Well, that's bad news for Aronian, because I would say that's the critical line, is putting the bishop on d4. And if that move gets literally checkmated instantly, then he has to look for some I don't know what. King c2 played. Knight c6 to keep the bishop off of d4. Okay. So he runs with the king, and on pawn takes c4, he would go here, and the queen can no longer get into b2. And these pieces, I mean, they look better than the queen and the 2 rooks, right? We could say these 3 minor pieces are well placed, potentially worth more than all that business. So knight c6 played by Nodierbeck to stop bishop d4. And Levant's already played something else. Knight c3. The pawns roll. He could have sacked an exchange here and played d3 to pick up this, and white would have started getting pieces out of the corner. King runs. He's going to play d3 at some point and just get this piece back. Whenever he does, material will be about equal and the position will be about equal. Wow, that's complicated. So Noiterbeck keeps the tension. He says, these pawns are better than this bishop. That's what he's saying. Because right now he's got this many pieces trapped in behind the queen and bishop. I would agree with Noiterbeck. I don't know. What do you all think? What's your feeling here as to, like, are these pawns better or worse than this bishop? Queen gets out, attacks the bishop, makes room for the rook. I mean, there's a limit to how much better than a bishop 2 pawns can be, right? Like, white will eventually get these pieces out. Bishop f6. I think Levant is still sort of in the game. Maybe it's just compared to checkmate, this looks so much better. But I think feels like he's very close to untangling, right? I mean, he's 1 or 2 rook moves away. Was there a correct percentage other than 0 or 100? I mean, you know, when I was 3 moves away from checkmating him, you could have said the chance was 95% or something. And then when I was 1 move away, 99.9, and depending. Deep think from Levant. He gets a little bit low on time there. Takes on f6. Quick recapture on a5. Still not choosing to go d3, kicking the bishop. Now I think it's because he's afraid this bishop will, like, light him up on the long diagonal. Looking for bishop c4 to defend b3. Can the knight go to a5 here? You can't throw in d3. I was going to suggest d3 for a second, but, you know, the queen. Oh, he just trades and lets the bishop come to its dream square. All right. King and queen on this diagonal. This bishop's amazing. Knight a5 might be coming. The queen's covering the square too. Is there something wrong with knight a5? Well, it doesn't do much. Damn, this bishop's getting really good. And the clocks are getting a little bit closer, right? It was about 5 minutes to 1 at the beginning of this. Levant dipped as low as 30 seconds, but built up a few more seconds on his clock with what I think is a 10-second increment. We can watch closely when they move. Although the relay clocks are rarely super perfect, right? Wow. Well, yeah, and Noiterbeck thinking quite a bit here. Queen e7, getting 1 pieces off that diagonal and allowing queen takes f5, right? Is that not the end of his entire position? And Levant's going to win the game. Wow. All right, we correctly sensed that his situation was starting to fall apart there. Now he's got absolutely nothing. This pawn's already, like, useless because of this, which means this is now like an isolated pawn. The bishops are starting to just rake him. King's got nowhere better to adjust to. It's over. Yeah, you know, at lower levels, it often feels like the person who sacrifices does, on average, better than they should, right? Like, the person who's down material, more often than not, the correct defenses aren't found. And you can sort of get away with all kinds of slightly dubious but aggressive options. But at the top level, it's like they can cling on grimly in just unbelievably horrible positions. Yeah, it looked like Levant was dead for sure. Dead to rights. Queen d3 was obvious. Blockading the pawns, putting more pressure on this one, but also putting some pressure on this one because the d pawn's not really protecting it, right? And getting out of the way of f5 to soften up this king more. This is not going to last much longer here. Black could resign, or they could play a few more moves, but I'd be shocked if white didn't win at this point. It's just so hopeless for black. Just so little to do. Queen takes c5, collecting maybe one pawn. One option for white. Queen takes e3, retaliating. I mean, his knights become really weak in this position compared to the bishops. Gives a rook for one of them. To absolutely no purpose. Why didn't he play knight a5 before the bishop came to c4? Was there an obvious... Remember this right here where I thought like knight a5? To not let white play bishop c4? Was there a reason there not to play knight a5? I don't know. All right, here we are in the live position. King gets off of one of the diagonals, I guess. Obvious would be just f5 pushing ahead. Also, since black's doing nothing, white could play h4, h5. Well, a takes b3 next would open the b file then, right? Because it wouldn't be defended. He had a rook on b7. I'm playing a takes b3 next, and then a takes b3. I'll take on b3 with the knight or the rook and attack the white king. King's gonna move to like a2, no? Maybe not. Okay, bouncing across, but then the knight comes into c4, right? Black's definitely attacking that way, right? First of all, the pawn on b3 is an attacker. It's so close to the white king, it's controlling a2 and c2, so it counts as an extra attacker kind of there. And then the knights gain the c4 square, and there's pressure against... Yeah, and the bishop on b2 can be captured whenever you need to. All right, he's down a full rook here and just struggling on his Nodierbeck. Really surprising toughness. f5 here is a shot. Now black can't push past with g5. f5, gf5, rook f1. GG. Finds it. Blitzes it. Against knight e7, you can play queen d4 or c6. They're both super effective. Okay, king tries to skip around. Queen f5 is allows queen b3, so that's slightly something you'd have to calculate if you've got 10 seconds on the clock. Rook f5 might be simpler. Then he's worrying about rook a3, e2. Wow, so with 4 seconds left on the clock, he doesn't do it. Nodierbeck saves his pawn, but not for long. He's looking for some true magic out of the centralized king here. True magic. There goes the pawn duo that holds all black's hopes, accompanied by the king. Knight d4 coming next. Honestly, I could mess this up in a blitz game if I had 2 seconds of increment or less. 2, 1, or 0. With 10 seconds of increment, it would feel weird not to win this, wouldn't it? Well, there's some difficulty. Jeez, Levon getting a bit low. Rook g2 would be tempting. He goes for it. Nice. As black, I think you have to take on a3. But Nodierbeck comes up with something else. That's encouraging. King d1. Rook a3. I mean, do they realize that after rook g5, black has knight e5? How does that even do anything for white? He just sacked a rook and a piece. And it's a draw. He sacked a full rook and piece, and the game is a draw. That was crazy. That was really quite crazy. So he suggests that he wants to send the white king to the first rank so that white can be in danger of losing the game. And Levon says, sure, put me in danger of losing the game. Wow. That was wild. So you could go knight e5 here, I think, and win the h-pawn. Knight e5, knight f7. Win the h-pawn and play rook and knight against rook for a bit if he wants to. You don't think he can get it bouncing across? He sends the king back. He didn't send the knight through e5 and f7. Instead, he sort of safeguarded the king position first. I don't know if it made a difference, but he's now found the knight f7 idea. So he is going to get rook and knight against rook. I think with 10 seconds, there shouldn't be any real true risk to Levon. But maybe I underestimate it. This game was brutal back and forth multiple times. It was a real shocker of a game. In general, I agree with you guys. There shouldn't be any hope. But I suppose you could get tired and all. Do you guys want to watch this, or do you want to see like how the king was on the run on move 1? So far, it looks normal. Takes, here. What was that move? Far too bold by Levon. Absolute madness, this move. And he just says, come out, come out. I mean, this position had to be minus 10 million. I cannot believe that Noterbeck had this in 7 moves and didn't win. Well, I mean, I can believe, but wild excitement. Only that's one of those moves, e4, that's like only a beginner or a creative super genius could come up with that. Because where would anyone ever get the idea to do that, you know? The pieces are set up differently, Savage Parts, so that the players won't be able to rely on opening theory. So they'll have to think for themselves. Yeah, that's the big idea with this tournament. Think for yourself, because theory won't be there for you. I'm not too interested in watching them play this part out. I think I'm going to go look at the other games that were played this round. Okay, folks? If you disagree, that's fine. You're right. You can let me know, and it'll help me know what you want me to do in the future. But me, personally, I'd rather go see some other game. All right, so this was same position that Levon and Noterbeck had. B3 and C4 was Levon's opening there. Gukesh starts with a orangutan, B4. Calm Owen's defense. Lots of space for white. All right. So is this going to be good or bad to have the English here? I feel like this bishop is going to be nice here. And this extra space is not as good. This pawn will be able to hold up. I think already I kind of like black's opening, but here Gukesh does something very interesting. And I haven't yet figured it out, how the knights are going to affect this. But I'll just say this. If you got a settled structure with, D3, D6, and they each had a pawn of strength, I would prefer black's position. Wow. Firouzja's also courting disaster here, right? On G7 with Rook G4 or Queen G3. I mean, what was he hoping? That there was a bishop here and he could like checkmate on E3 or something? You can't play like that. What was he thinking? That looked risky. Queen G3 is what was played. He countered with F6. The rook came back, yeah. Invites the knight. He's got bishop B3 coming. Holy moly. If he goes D3 to cover the square, I bet there's going to be a cheeky bishop takes C1. Knight C3 would be the obvious move. It does allow bishop D2 and knight C4. White's position is weirdly ragged here if the knights aren't getting in on things at all. So he goes in on just tactics time. But then he can't find anywhere to move the rook. What's the point of all of this if you can't even move your rook? And black's just got a better endgame with the bishop here. To me, this is already a mistake. Like, you're letting the king and rook develop. Oh, but if you don't, he's afraid black's going to castle and get the rook out that way. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, well, lacking development. Nice. Such a bad position for white. The black king even has this amazing square. Gets complicated. The knight can't move somewhere? I guess it is pretty low on squares. There's 91. Yeah, white's just lost. Like here, I mean, this is probably not even your best thing to trade your rooks off, but and then you take this and you start going after this pawn chain. C pawn can't get past the bishop. King's nice. Gets behind that. Black's up a pawn. Two pawns. Thank you, Moondog. I'm surprised you can tell so quickly. But yeah, I'm going to stream more of the tournament. But Saturday and Sunday, tomorrow and the day after, my kids will be home for the weekend. So I will not be able to stream those rounds live. Comes in here. It's just brutal. Pushing the king. You know, like a big part of why this endgame was so smooth for Alireza is because of that weakness on g4 made by this h4 push. I mean, whether or not this move had to be played, I don't know, but the impact of it, this weak light square in an endgame, and you can see Firouzja's so calm about this. Like, he keeps more pawns on the board. He doesn't rush to take a2 and trade it for a different pawn. He lets white save the a2 pawn. He just trades a piece, develops his pieces, and then his king says, you know, here it comes. That's hard to deal with. e4, rook takes d3, and yeah, this king just gets in there. Gukesh tries this bishop takes e5 tactic, and he just lets it bounce off of him, right? Takes all the pawns on light squares. And it's hard. This looks like a big piece of counterplay. If it were just a pure bishop ending or just a pure rook endgame at this point, it would be a good amount of counterplay. But with this opposite bishop that white can't deal with, the pawn's not as good. And then by the time they transition into the pure bishop ending, he's got his rook behind that pawn, which makes things easier. And the king goes back to that weakness on g4 and into f3. And white just resigned because he's basically going to come around and checkmate him, right? From either g2 or h2. Just off of that king position that he got through. Beautiful. This game has been agreed drawn. All right, so let's see where we're at. Looks like they're getting set for round 2 already. In round 1, Magnus drew with Vincent Kamer. Levon and Noterbag had that insane game that they each should have won and each should have lost and each drew in the end. And Fabi won a game against Dingley Ren with perhaps very weird things. Some people saying that his clock shows that he only spent 3 minutes on the entire game, which is, you're allowed to do that if you're winning a game in like 20 moves against an opponent who's too weak for you. But when you're losing a game, then your coach is going to ask you, you know, well, did you never realize you were in a bad position? Did you never, you know, notice that there were any important decisions? Why didn't you use any of your time? Yeah, I clicked on for a second on the main broadcast, you know, just out of curiosity because I would have liked to do the main broadcast. And I was just curious who they got rather than me, and I saw they had Leko and thought, well, he's really good. So you know, I can't be jealous or upset about Leko. Okay, but oh yeah, and he lost in like 25 moves, so it's not that long. So he plays d4, f5. Fabi also saying with the bishop here, he wants to stake out its diagonal. c4. So last game we saw b4 and c4 versus e5, and I said I thought it would be good for black. Here, d4 and c4 is much more plausible to me than d4 and c4, because at least we're not letting black block this piece. But still, the bishop's running into this pawn, even if black adopts like an e6, you know, classic structure, which Fabi does here. And again, I'm going to say I prefer the side with space on the side of the board with kings and with this bishop on an open diagonal. So again, I think this opening favored black as well within like 3 moves. That's my take. Should we ask the engine eval, folks? Plus 1.2. h4, h5, knight d3. Is the engine broken? Are you okay, engine? Do you need some medicine? Oh yeah, we are, Ranga. I think I even put it on the calendar. Check this out. Chess Dojo scoreboard. Lima Dotto. What's up is what Rangov's just asking about. There's a tournament tomorrow. A good old classical tournament. A Dojo classic. It's not classical. It's a rapid tournament. A classic Dojo rapid calendar. Let's see if it's showing up. Saturday Rapid Swiss. I don't know if that's it's not probably captured for you guys, but it's over there on the Chess Dojo scoreboard calendar. The dojo's still in PST, even if none of us are. That's right. Fabi actually thought about the position a lot. That's true. Fabi on these first 3 moves has spent more time than we think Dingley Rent spent on the entire game, depending on whether we can trust the clocks. But that is what we see, is that he spent more time on these 3 moves than Ding on the entire game. F3 to block that bishop scope. Knight D6, keeping control of this square. Not going to let white play E4. Absolutely not. Knight D2, fighting for C4 and E4. Ooh, Fabi. Okay, so he's saying he's going to lock this in. You better do something before he plays Knight F5. You would think G3 would be the move to try. The lack of kingside space is already worrisome. He just develops around it. Trades off the knight before it can go to E3, but locks in this file against the backward pawn. Oof. No bueno. Oh my god, he can't even block with the queen because of queen takes knight. He should have played queen here first. Oh, it's a horror. It's a horror. He's playing like a beginner, folks. I don't know what to say. He's the world champion of old chess, opening theory chess. But he's a beginner right here. I mean, he just lost in 9 moves with white. While playing, very obviously bad moves. It's not like Fabi did something like that came out of outer space. Sends the knight here. This position's obviously bad for white, but you should try to stop queen e3. Doesn't stop it. Hangs the rook. I mean, yeah, it's exactly Freddie Potter. Whoops, didn't see that. Oof, didn't see that. Oh, didn't see that either. Ouch. Now, Fabi's completely winning, but we see Fabi still seemingly thinking about his moves, and Ding just playing some quick ones. Interesting choice from Fabi to go up a pawn rather than trying to preserve the extra exchange with this weirdly placed rook, right? Was this on purpose, freeing up that bishop on a1? And here, why not play bishop d5, attacking a knight and blocking the pawn? And then g5? Are you okay, Fabi? I think Fabi is just blundering. Checking with the computer. It agrees with me. It says bishop d5 winning. Moves other than bishop d5 not winning. What the heck? Now he just transposed to rook and knight against rook and bishop in an open position. What? He has to re-win the whole game all over again. Oops. Are you kidding me? He could go to c3 or a1, right? And he literally just did that? Yikes. Didn't see that one. Honestly, Freddie, I've never seen you play a game as bad as this game of dings. I mean, it's funny to compare it to your games, but I haven't yet seen the game that you played that was this bad. Magnus is going to be regretting the invitation. Do you guys know that Magnus invited the opponents he wanted to play against for this event? I mean, maybe he invited Naka and Naka refused to come, but in general, like, you know, some people may not have come, but he picked everybody who did come, I think. It's all his invitations and who he thought would be, you know, the most interesting and difficult opponents. Because there was definitely a point in time a few years ago where Magnus must have found Ding to be one of the more difficult opponents in tournaments to play, just one-on-one-ish. But yeah, at this point, he's going to be regretting inviting like 1-1200 to the tournament and 6 super GMs. That was rubbish and brutal. I know we all like Ding, right? I mean, as a person, but brutal. Good idea from Unknown Cool Man. The winner should get to change their name to Magnus. Like, his name should be at stake. It should be the prize in the tournament. The winner becomes Augustus Magnus Magnificus. Well, he invited Dingley Ren. Did you see that game, Unknown Cool Man? I'm not going to re-show you the whole horror show that we just went over together. But not only did Ding lose the game in 8 moves, but Fabi then let him back into the game, blundered material back and forth. And in this position here, Ding, with 22 and a half out of 25 minutes left on his clock, put his bishop on e5 and finally resigned. Honestly, I wouldn't have even resigned as white against somebody who let me play d5 and bishop takes h8 against them. I would keep playing. You know, I will resign against you when you make me feel like you've probably got what it takes to win the game. And Fabi, shaky this game. But that happens to some extent. You can play down a little bit to the level of your opponent. And Ding was playing like 1200, so Fabi played like, 2100 instead of 2800 or something. I mean, he tried to keep using his time and tried to like stay focused and not be like, not ask for a welfare check on Ding. I can see from the clock usage he tried to like stay on it, but I guess some things are just too much to not sort of confuse you, right? Like, you're playing Dingley Ren and he's blitzing his moves and they're bad, and you're like looking up to check if it's really him or some kind of cyborg bionic bot installed to replace him. I mean, you can't help but wonder. All right, so when's round 2? We want to know. I mean, we've got a couple. We could look at Magnus versus Vincent as well, for sure. I just don't want to miss the next round. So let me just check what the schedule says. Rapid day 1. It only says when the day starts, not the schedule for the day. The finals are February 16th. That's next Friday. So I'm going to get to cover the whole finals next week on Thursday and Friday. I'll get to cover semifinals day 2 on Wednesday and quarterfinals day 2 on Monday. There's only 3 days this week that the kids are home, I think, so I should get in some good coverage. And I'll try and pop on and do some asynchronous thoughts and wrap-ups on other rounds when I get the chance. Anyone want to keep an eye for us and let us know if round 2 starts while we look at Magnus versus Kamer over here? Oh, it's a short game. Yes, Ali Reza won convincingly, Marik. Oh, we thought the same thing playing over that game. Yeah. All right. So Maggie was the only one who didn't play some kind of weird queenside move to let the bishop out and tried to stake out kingside space instead to shelter this diagonal. I'm with Maggie on this, despite that one computer variation that said that in a bad position for white, they could go h4, h5, knight somewhere over here. I'm just literally making fun of the computer there because there's no way the computer was right. Hey, Abdul. I think Magnus showing the highest level already from move 1 here in this tournament. Good to start out that way. Yep, and now you open up. That's mildly concessionary. I would keep the symmetry, I think, here up to this point. He might also worry about, is Magnus going to play a quick King's Gambit here? The King's Gambit could be potentially very powerful here. EF, Rook F4, and then you castle kingside to defend the rook. Despite the disaster that befell Gukesh. Gukesh is the other one who played, like, he started on the queen side and then he played F4 to open up his bishop. Then he wandered weirdly with his rook against Ali Reza and it didn't work out for him. But it was complicated, and at least the move F4 is interesting. So if you try to fight for F4, you could play a move like this. But it's a bit committal for your bishop. For example, if white plays H4, are you really going to commit to H6 already? Maybe. But the other question is knight d3 hitting this pawn, and now you're kind of being asked to play one of these moves. And f6 is worrisome. Ali Reza got away with it, like f6 here and castling as an idea. But the point is that the attack on e5 allows white to play f4 anyway if they want to, right? So bishop g5, I think it's all risk and no reward. Like, it doesn't stop f4, but there is also the risk that after h4 your bishop's badly placed. So, but I still stand by not liking d6. What I like is b6. That's my thought there. Thanks, John. Try and keep our eye on that. Je ne suis pas sûr, Rivage. C'est pas moi qui m'occupe de ces choses-là. Mais je t'assure que si on te renouvelle automatiquement sans que tu le veuilles, et puis tu nous envoies un message, quelqu'un te rendra tes sous. Ça, c'est sûr. Mais si tu veux savoir d'avance si c'est automatique, il faudrait demander à Jack. Il faudrait envoyer un message à lui pour t'assurer. Thanks for the raid, Attila. How are you doing? Hope you're doing great. So here's my thought with b6. This move, we know that this is how the bishop has to come out. The d6 move is, I mean, it's maybe useful, but it's a little bit of a concession. It's taking away a square from this knight. If white plays like d4 or f4 early on and you trade this pawn, then you might have no need for d6. It doesn't let out a bishop on c8. So I think there's lots of situations where you don't necessarily need to move this pawn. So this is like too early a commitment by Vincent. And the b6 move, you'll see the force of it also as soon as I show you a variation. Like if white goes d4, taking over the center, we take, boom. Did you see that? Then, if white goes f4, same thing. We take, and now we go like Ali Reza here. You know, assuming that Ali Reza was right about this calculation that you could defend g7 like this. And having this bishop out, it's limiting white tactically, right? You can always play h5, rook g3, and take on e4. So white has to be very careful about this. So I'm pretty certain b6 would be the best move. Abdul says, what about b5? b5 should be playable as well. To me, it's just mildly weakening. Like, there's no big advantage. You don't yet know that you're trying to play all these moves. It's hard to get them in. White's got knight c3 and a4, and you're just going to be... The pawn's just hanging out there to dry. It's hanging, right? So b6 should be correct. d6 was played. Round 2 does not seem to have started yet. d4 from Maggie. Yeah, now already I'd be regretting d6 a little bit, I think. He goes passive. I don't know if that's it, Vincent. c4. Maybe develop a piece, Maggie? Knight d3 would be really logical once you're no longer blocking the d-pawn and you're putting pressure, right? They did the position reveal. Okay. Oh, and here comes e4 from Vincent Kamer in round 2. But the chess.com position isn't yet revealing the right position. We'll see soon. Vinny? Okay. Tell me more about it. Why do we want to call him Vinny? Knight d3 looks correct, you know, and then if your opponent goes here, 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 for example, you have one or two other resources like c3 or queen e3. But certainly this is a position where it's not so clear that you even want to play c4, whether you have to trade or defend. Maggie and Vinny. Okay. Maggie versus Vinny here. You know, I'd be tempted to play c3, honestly, or queen e3. Yeah, so I think this feels like an inaccuracy from Maggie. We get the trade. And a wild b5 from Vinny, hitting e4. Normally, the normal chess position is not included, Abdul. But so far, it looks like Vincent and Levon. I don't know if that's right or not. There we go. Woo! Shuffle, shuffle, shuffled. All right, folks, we're going to switch to the live games now. I know that we're not seeing the first move yet, but there's a lot to talk about once you see the starting position immediately. Okay? I haven't played a ton of Chess 960 recently. I haven't played a ton of chess in the last 10 years. But way back in the day, I definitely spent some time thinking about it. So I have a lot of interest and some thoughts about this. They're, you know, not like super GM level thoughts, but they're also, you know, not level 0 thoughts or whatever. Okay, let's look at this for a second. One of the first things to look at is, you know, do you have any bishops in the corner or like stuck to the sides? Not really. Are the bishops both on one side or the other? Sometimes if you've got two bishops on one side of the board, they're pointing at one side together, and then I don't want my king on that side. I want to try and castle way far away if I can, if there's two bishops pointed that way. Then you always want to check if there's an undefended pawn somewhere. Boop, 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 boop. They're all defended this time. You know, like an f7 kind of thing, right? Only sometimes it's even weaker. Sometimes you can just, you know, send a knight here, 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 checkmate. And people have to watch out for it. It can be that. It can crop up in the tactics. All right. Let's see real quick that we're not missing moves. Probably going to watch this game. Oh, this game's not showing the right position. So I'll go back over here. Hey, Cartier. In this position, if white goes e4, the Caro-Kann is reasonable as a response for black. The knights are perfectly well placed, have a lot of options to immediately start fighting for the center. The bishops have two different legit ways to come out, which I find that most interesting. I like when there's two ways to bring out the bishops, because it gives more choices, makes it more interesting. The king can eventually castle. Yeah, the reason why the Karo is reasonably good in these kind of positions is that this bishop can develop to h7 very well in a Karo by just playing h6 at some point. And this bishop has good prospects as well. And white playing e5, an advanced variation, doesn't hurt this bishop much at all. It can still, like, it's just very well placed here, and this one also. So that's something I remember about when the bishops are on these squares, that they're pretty decent for a Karo. You cannot have both bishops be on the same color square quad for white or black. So there's a rule that, like, if this bishop's on d1, this bishop has to be on a1, c1, g1, or e1. One of the dark squares. There's also a rule the king has to be between the two rooks. So castling is possible. And the way you castle is you move your king 2 steps towards the rook and then put the rook on the other side of... No. It's not that. The way you castle is your king ends up on c1 or g1 no matter what. Good thing I'm reviewing the rules. The rooks go to d1 or f1 as normal. So you have to get everything out of the way. And then you would castle by going there. Here, a long castle by white to the king side would need all these squares to be unattacked by black pieces. And a castle over here would just need your bishop and queen out of the way, and then you can just put the rook over here without the king moving. All right, d4 played. It's reasonable. I think in this position, the best first two moves are probably e4 and d4. F4 is probably the third best move and also playable. You don't think the center is that important if pieces aren't restricted by it, like if the position is symmetrical? The center is still usually important, Abdul. A position where the center isn't important would be a real exception, even here. All right, c3, getting a tempo. That's not the most useful move from black, so that was nice for white by Vincent. H3 and G4 come to mind as a plan. But at the moment, I think most flexible would be just bringing out the knight here. Well, let me ask you this, Abdul. Do you have a plan for how you would want to handle this move? C4, F5. Do you want to trade the pawns, or do you want to play knight E3 or D3 or what? I think the last game has to be at least somewhat emotional for Levon. I think he's a person. He may be chill, but I mean, he's a super competitor, right? He's got to have some... E4 is no. Okay, well, let's explain the meaning of the move before I just say no to it. The meaning of the move is we're going to lose some time for white, but leave black's e-pawn backward on this file. So we're like achieving the e4 break against the Dutch, but at the cost of using our queen. And you could think of it also as being kind of like the center counter game, or let's say e4, c5, d4, cd4, queen d4 in the normal chess. Should I call up a normal board? You guys can do that blindfolded, right? e4, c5, d4. Sicilian, where white plays d4. I mean, it never happens, but like if in theory white did it. See this position, this idea here? Right? What's the point of it? To sort of pressure this pawn here. And you get the same thing in the Dutch, right? That there's a line with knight c3, and the point of it is to try and get this structure here. Obviously, black will normally play knight f6 to stop you, right? But I'm just showing the idea. If black couldn't stop you. You get this, and it's kind of like the Sicilian, and the point is that you've got this file to try and keep these pawns a little bit backward in the center, and that's limiting black's ability to expand with them. So that's kind of the idea behind this e4 move. And he's going to be aware that he's going to lose time on it with the queen because, you know, he's seen e4, c5, d4, cd4, queen d4 before. Right? He's seen this kind of position. You pay with some time. But I will just say, in my opinion, do you guys know of any opening like that that's good for white in normal chess, where it's worth moving your queen like 2 times to make this kind of a pawn trade? Like the Sicilian and the Dutch are not that bad to begin with, but if you make like 2 moves with your queen to make a pawn trade like that, the positional gain is not that significant. So I'm still with me. Knight d3, flexible development for the knight. Just letting black play 1 or 2 more moves to help me know what I want to do. One thing I'm curious is, you know, if black's going to spend a move bringing out the bishop to play e6 and try and put his bishop in here, I want to know which way black's planning to bring out the bishop. So that's part of the flexibility of knight d3, which is definitely the best square for this piece, right? Many potential good squares it can go from, and you know, you need to develop, but we try and develop with the most flexible move we can. I don't yet know if I want to go, you know, e3 and bring the bishop this way, or bishop b3 to this diagonal. Maybe a takes b3 and develop my rook. But if I do this right away, then my opponent knows that the bishop's out of the way and they can play e6 and not trap the bishop on g8 and bring the bishop this way. But if I go knight d3 and my opponent plays c6 to bring the bishop this way, now I can go here. And it's not as awesome for them to play e6, although they might still do it, but at least, you know, they spent the move there. And even then, I might, you know, keep staying flexible with some other things I can do. I'm probably going h3, bishop h2 also. That's another thing I kind of know. So that would be another move you could play here is h3 to go bishop h2 faster. Because your bishop doesn't have a lot of prospects through d4 right now. So you probably want to go h3. I go knight d3, c6, h3, bishop here. Like this. White has a pleasant little edge already, honestly. This pawn's on a dark square. It's a little bit better than this one, a little more in the center. It's kind of like a maneuvering Dutch. Black's dark squares are a little bit weak. You can bring the bishop out to one of these squares and castle kingside quickly if you want, and your king will defend the knight. Or you could go for a faster g4 if you need something more complicated for some reason, depending on what black does, if they're slow with bringing out the knights. But they should be playing a move like knight f6. You know, limiting your e4 and g4 breaks. It's going to be a slower, more maneuvering game, more of like a London kind of game than like a double king pawn, obviously. Apologies if that's like too deep into what's going on for anybody here with sort of you know, going into the first couple moves, but we never get to do that in normal chess, and for me that's kind of like the fun, exciting thing. Part of the fun, exciting thing with Chess 960 is actually getting to ponder and think about where we want to bring the pieces, and you know, how to preserve flexibility or when to put more pressure on, and what kind of an opening we have and all that. So e4, I don't like it. c6, I don't see why you would delay knight f6. That looks like a great move. Sometimes it's good to pop the queen as soon as possible because she has to think about getting in the way of these pieces here. Depends. Yeah, of course, Chess 960 should be played at classical time controls, which they'll start doing on day 3 of this tournament, Kritik. You know, there's more to think about, so it's all the better to have more time. C6 to maybe do this, but also just to bring out these pieces. But I think you want to play e6 and bishop out this way, so maybe that would be a reason to play like knight d6. Hit the queen somewhere. I don't even know where she would go. Because like that's the point. You do this soon before they've brought out their other pieces. Knight e3 is not there yet, so we can play this move. And yikes, right? If you move the queen, you already lost this piece. Go here, knight e6. Now you have to cover the knight f4 move. So you can't play knight e3 again. You have to play some defensive move around knight f4. Black's doing great already. Where should the queen go? Yeah, this was the right move. Knight d6, I think. Not knight f6 or anything else. Queen e5. Oh my god, Cartier. That is a heavy move. Very powerful. So then the knight would have to come here, and then you can come here safely, and it's not that good. Okay, so not knight d6. Oh, it's a very tricky situation then. That's what's so cool, is then you have to calculate a bunch of stuff as well, because there's all these new little patterns and nuances. So knight d6, definitely wrong in view of queen e5. Levon may have seen that and played c6 to stop it partly. We'll see. But he's playing towards bishop d5 and then e6, or he's trying to get the bishop out, I think, before playing e6, which is noble. Vincent's deep in thought, man. He's spent a third of his time on the first 4 or 5 moves now. We're 4 moves in. Levon spent a minute. Spaglotti reports that Ding is now using his time, which is exciting. Should we quickly see what else is going on? Gukesh and Magnus, f4. Yeah, that's a reasonable move in this case. Yep. c3, yeah. Interesting. Brings out that queenie. Yeah, black looks acceptable. No. Kamer's opening was bad even without immediate knight d6, Abdul. It's less bad. Because you saw with knight d6, queen e2, bishop c4, I was almost losing for white. So it's definitely not that bad, but it's bad. It should be bad. And look at his time usage. I don't think that's just his personality or something. The obvious move would be knight e3. Stopping bishop d5, defending g2. Developing a piece. Then on knight d6. And the knight's also stopping the bishop from going to like these squares, right? Contesting that. Knight e3. We'd expect like knight d6 or f6, and our queen can drop back to c2 or d3 peacefully. Yeah, man, he's really tanking. Is there something wrong with knight e3? Is there a tactic there? Because that's actually a super obvious move for white. An odd thought about this is that, you know, black can actually take over the center. We've moved our queen back and forth. Black can do this. I can probably get away with it. I don't know if that's like the best thing black can do, but it can be done. D2. Yeah, protecting the weak squares makes sense. The queen kind of wants to come in, but I guess the rook can just chase her out. Okay, so that was a fine move from Gukesh. And wow, that's an electrifying move from Magnus. I was about to click away to try and answer Hritik's question about Ding, but the boss is playing, says Cartier, and the boss is not playing. We can also say that's an American expression when you're not fooling around, when you're being serious. I mean, he is playing a game, but he's being serious in the game. This move here is heavy. What is it about? So it would look like knight g5 would be great for white's pawn structure and for being up material because you're taking a pawn, but it would hang the rook on g1. So white's big options are taking, pushing, and pushing. And ignoring, I guess. You know, queen d3 developing. Queen d3 looks reasonable. Magnus is going to try and split Gukesh's pawn structure in 3 here. He's going to still have 2 pawn islands for black, and white could potentially have 3. So Gukesh takes his challenge and grabs the pawn. And now Maggie's got to tell us what it's about. The thing that you don't like about 960 is that you don't understand anything, and in normal chess, it's already barely understandable. Yeah, that's why, Abdul, chess 960 is not necessary, in my opinion, for non-masters, let's say. And where somebody cuts that off, you know, if they want to cut it off at, you know, 2,000 FIDE or 2,200 FIDE or 2,400 FIDE, etc. But basically, chess 960 comes in once you're at a level where the players are spending more of their time memorizing openings than anything else, and then their games are starting to be decided heavily by who knows how many moves, and you're getting a very high draw percentage. If you had the best players in the world play classical chess 960 against them, as we're going to see this week, you'd have a much, much, much lower draw rate, like 1,000,000 times lower. So, 1,000,000 times. I mean, it depends. You know, if you've got people who just want to draw and do like the knight dance, like Nepo, you can't. You know, chess 960 won't stop people from cheating and prearranging draws. But if the players are just sitting down honestly to play, at you know, the 2,700 plus level, the draw rate is about 3 out of 4 games, 75% of games. A little bit higher, I think, but you know, between 3 and 4 and 4 out of 5 games are drawn. And if you switch it to chess 960, I think that'll drop to maybe 1 to 2 games out of 4. So it's like, you know, the draw rate's going to be cut in half or better. And that gives you a lot more excitement as a spectator. Even if you don't understand everything, right? I would still argue that even if we don't understand everything, that games like this one here are exciting, even without understanding. To see Levon Aronian and Noderbeck playing out a position like this, like when did you last see 2 really, really good 2,700 plus players disputing like a king chase? When did you last see that? Wow, is he avoiding a draw here by not coming back? Queen h4, king here. Like, when did you last see something like this? I mean, maybe you see Hikaru play the bomb cloud in bullet games against other idiots or something, but we don't get to see this kind of excitement normally in games between 2700s, or we have to wade through many games to see one or two games that are this exciting. And here you get, half or more of the games are going to be exciting. Okay, so here we are. Let's see what Vincent did. He played knight d2, not e3. Let the bishop come out. Knight d6 gets played. Moves the queen again. Uh-oh. Now he's costing Levon time. His queen's going to go into g7, I think, and try and make those pieces all trip over each other. No. He just runs. Okay. Stable-ish endgame reached. I don't think we want to spend all our time on that game. Let's see if we can find something better. That's a bad fool. This position looks really bad for Firouzja. Yeah, there's a little lag, so I got to see you suggest Alireza versus Fabi after I had gone to Alireza versus Fabi. My feeling is that White's structure and bishop are just busted. There's no levers. There's no dynamism. Well, okay, there's a lever over here that only leads to White's doom. It looks like this knight on e7 can hold at bay every white piece at once. Even this one, because it's blocked like this. But at some point, if you relied on your knight to defend every single thing, there'd be a breakthrough sacrifice somewhere. So you actually have to allocate a little bit other resources. Maybe one more rook like this is perfect. And now you can go looking to win the game with the queen. Go fishing. Go fishing, Queenie. We're into here. She adopts a passive posture. How piddly. What a pity. Maybe queen b5, c4, and then c5 didn't work tactically for black, although that would be a real miracle for white. So Fabi defends everything for now. I also want to just see what the other position was real quick. Let me just look. So we've got the endgame, we've got this. We've got Magnus, where we don't know why he sacked the pawn, and we've got Noderbek versus Ding. Ding is down a pawn with a bad position, I want to say. Bishop g3. Knight e2, queen e2, rook e2. But the knight can go to e6 in that line too if white wants. Extra pawn plus knight on e6 versus the bishop. Can black fight their way out of it? Definitely looks bad for black. I don't know if we want to watch Ding play today. So over here I've got Magnus. No. Over here I've got Vincent and Levon. I'm going to X that out. We're going to have Magnus on that board, and here we're going to have Alireza. and Fabi. Let's see what Fabi can do. Rerouting the knight. That seemed like the cheapest piece to cover his weaknesses. What's he going for? He's got the idea of knight h6 to g4 followed by bishop d8 to trap that rook, I guess. And maybe just in general, knight h6 to g4. Yeah. Or knight f6 to g4, same-ish thing, but it allows rook g6 as an option. So yeah, he wants to go knight h6 to g4 against almost anything. And I think that Firouzja's position is bad enough that he needs to put the pawn on f3. Either now or, you know, prepare it for one move. But probably just now. Oh, this position's bad. Also, even without the knight maneuver, there's just bishop d8 and then take the pawn on h4. That's a weak pawn. Because I just realized against f3, you know, bishop d8. Losing, right? This position is lost. This position is lost for white. It's probably time to play, what, c4 in that case to mess things up a little bit. Black takes on c4, knight takes c4, rook d4, knight b6. There's just no hope. There's no hope. I don't see anything for Firouzja to do. Let's see if we can figure out why Magnus sacked this g5 pawn. Huh? Where are the moves? There we go. You didn't miss all of it, Ollie, because we're still on. Uh-oh. But it is approaching the kids' pickup time, isn't it? All right. We'll watch whatever we get to watch. We'll get to watch, I think, this full round, which is good. Oh, missed it. Like, you're glad that I'm doing commentary and I wasn't doing commentary last week. I see. You know, the dojo and I, we go through phases, right? Doing one thing, then doing another thing, you know. More of our games, more of dojo tournaments, more of super tournaments, different stuff. Comes and goes. Different people have different favorites or preferences or whatever, but there's not really anything that I would give up, so to speak, right? Like, I don't want to never comment on GM tournaments. I don't want to never comment on viewer tournaments. I don't want to never do my own training. Everything needs to have its place. So g5, he sacks the pawn, then he castles the king here. This, for anyone who missed like the last couple moves of this game, this was quite a bold pawn sack by Maggie Pants. g5, here, and then he castles. I mean, his pieces aren't really over there either. It's very shocking to castle over there. And I guess he's planning to launch his a-pawn at Gukesh if he's castling here. But if he's planning to launch the a-pawn, like, wouldn't you want to just sort of like go for it and keep your castling as a trump card that you're not yet committed to? Is there any issue with knight e5? Queen f2. Knight e5 looks like a pretty good move for Gukesh, and let's see how castling affects it. I mean, here, Gukesh is thinking he could play knight e5. Attacking the bishop. The bishop could go to h5 or e8. If it goes to h5, there is knight takes d7. It's a little bit hard to believe that that's going to be okay. Yeah, you could start with queen c2, but the timing is super important, Abdul, because if you go queen c2 here, then after a5, knight e5, black might have time for a4. So that's why, you know, it was worth spending some time thinking about knight e5 here, hitting this spot. If you can go knight e5 and force bishop e8 and then play queen c2 or queen d3, here queen d3 might not look so good because of knight c5, but with knight e5 on the board, bishop e8, you can definitely go queen d3, which I think is superior over queen c2, because for one thing, it gives you bishop c2 to retreat the bishop if you need to, and for another thing, it's sort of just more in communication with the king side. So there was a strong argument to want to play knight e5. And you see a5 came from Magnus quite quickly here in response to queen c2. So it was definitely worth thinking about. Gukesh must have seen something he didn't like with knight e5. I don't know what it was. But that doesn't mean that he's wrong, obviously. Oh, excuse my yawning, folks. You know, you don't know what time zone I'm in right now. It is 3 p.m. here. Typical time to yawn. Your original idea was to play a4 for white to stop black's pawn on a5, right? Yeah. You could do that. I mean, the first move to test your idea against is knight here, hitting these squares that are just a little bit weak, and this square, which is now being fought over. And then takes. You know, we've got knight e5 or e5, but this a pawn is looking risky. So in general, white's king is a little bit exposed here. I just saw a couple tiny clips of Putin on Twitter, Cartier. I go to Twitter now and then to see what people in the chess world are talking about. And to encourage people to come watch our Twitch streams, but that I generally forget to do. I'm not super convinced of this. Obviously, it's possible, Abdul. It's possible to play like this, but a little bit worrisome. You want to go b4, bishop a2. Okay. But with knight c5, I didn't give you time for the whole bishop a2 maneuver, right? So you pretty much have to trade it. And then you can't play b4 anymore because you've lost control of a4 already. So you could trade with the idea of b4 with this rook no longer defended. But black goes knight a4 and then comes after this file, which is weak and has lots of interesting stuff on it from black's perspective. Yeah. So a4 I don't think would be good here. Knight e5 would again be a critical move to consider, but Gukesh went with e5, and it got Magnus to think quite a bit. Bishop g6, we get the trade. Queen comes to look at e6, and the knight is still hanging. So the pawn on e6 might have to go here. You can only really block the queen's diagonal with this move. Knight takes here is kind of out of the question. Maybe there could be an insane idea like this. For Maggie. And then knight d2. You could take here. You could bring out the rook. I mean, still white's taking this, and we're sacking material. I don't know. I don't feel like that's super likely to be good. Another plausible move is knight e4. With the idea of knight takes e4, rook takes f3. Whenever the queen takes on e6, just going king h8. And the idea there is for the knight to be shaky and the queen to have access to e3 and f2 at some point, and black to start an attack against white's king. But here, white might be able to just castle queenside on that move. And black would need something, impactful. Knight b7 has been played. Going after this square, so he's going to take the check, come over here, then play knight c5 as soon as he can. Gukesh takes the second pawn from Maggie. And, well, hopefully he's got his defenses ready, because I would expect Magnus to play king h8 pretty quickly, and I would be wrong. Rook f7 played. So he defends the e-pawn. When knight c5 comes, the queen will have to unpin the rook. And it allows him to double rooks faster. Very, very strong move. Very strong move. I didn't see it coming because I was being loose, but once I see it, I'm pretty confident that's a nice one. So now, big threat coming from knight c5. Queen moves, knight d3 check. So knight e4, black can take it, rook takes, knight c5. Yeah. That's winning for black, so we can't go knight e4. I'm a bit scared, but I like being a pawn up. White's 2 pawns up, but I think possibly losing. Maybe knight b3 to stop knight c5, but then there's a4, knight bd4, knight c5, queen c6, knight c6, rook f3. Black's just about winning, maybe winning. I'll enjoy the pawn once I find a line that doesn't lose for white. This looks like a very strong attack is just kind of materializing here. I don't see any defense. Wow, knight b7. Knight b7. Oh my goodness. What an evil route. What an evil route. Obviously, I'm still not that good at knights. That I would have never found. All right, let's see what Jesse's telling me. All right, just trying to schedule dojo talks with the crew. And I told them, I want to talk about this tournament on Dojo Talks. And Jesse will respond, I don't even know what that tournament is, boss, and I don't care about it. Then I'll say, please, Jesse. Exactly, those are good subtopics, PB Corporeal. Is 960 the future of chess? Why are they calling it freestyle? I already put subtopics in our topics list like 5 weeks ago when somebody told me about this tournament. I wrote up a list of sub questions because I like for the shows to have sub questions, to give some direction to the show. Tell him Magnus is in it. Thank you, Speglotti. Yeah. I'll tell him. Magnus needs some life advice about this tournament he's in. There's something about his participation that feels a little bit like he's on the spectrum, Jesse. And I think he needs some more of your life advice. It would be great if they threw in some reps at the end, yeah. I need it, Freddie. Me, I do need it. All right. Gukesh's move. Knight d4. Yeah, so that was a hanging piece in any line that used this knight. So it makes sense to see it move. Now against knight c5, could he potentially allow knight d3? Like this? What, the idea of playing an endgame? I suppose something like this could be on the table. Let's see. Magnus has moved very quickly, I think. Knight c5, queen c6, knight d3, king d1. Okay, so Magnus went for all of this very quickly. I wish he could somehow play queen takes d4 and then give checkmate. What he can do is play knight b2 check. Probably. But not for sure. Yeah. One of my regrets, Pepper Picante, is I once wrote a rap battle between Magnus and Hikaru, and I've lost it. I can't find it. I'm a somewhat disorganized person. It's just gone. I don't know where it went. We don't know exactly what happened to Dane Kritik, except that it probably has to do with his mental health. It would not get many YouTube views, Pepper Picante, but it would be fun for those of us who saw it. It was, it was funny. Thinking quite a bit. You don't think Ali Reza is going to lose? Wow. Bishop check is possible, yeah. We don't know who it was. I don't know exactly who organized this tournament or came up with it. There's a lot I don't know about it. Is this the Ali Reza game? Okay, he just let the knight sit on g4 and defended the h-pawn. Look how good that defense is from Firouzja. I didn't see these moves. His position's so much less bad than before, huh? Or at least he makes it look a lot more like a real position. Looks like Fabi's playing for an eventual a5. He's got to be winning eventually, right? This bishop is literally, white's down a piece. Whoever said it was a fortress, I basically will never believe that, okay? Yeah, Magnus picked out the invited players. That I've heard in many places as well, past pawn. I think that much is true. A5 is hard to happen. What if black played, used the extra piece and played bishop c7? What would stop a5? Oh, he played bishop c7. That's why it's got the GOAT challenge in the name, right? Because like Magnus is the GOAT and he's looking to be challenged, right? It's something like that. All right, White's preparing knight e3 to go after the d5 pawn if black takes action here. Definitely some big questions. I think he doesn't. He did invite the current world champion. Thing is here, Michiko. He's not playing like the world champion, but Magnus invited him. It's just that he sort of didn't show up. Oh, you're talking about a chess 960 world champion. My bad. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Hikaru. Is Hikaru the Fischer Random World Champion or Wesley So? Whichever of them it is, because Wesley So did win a World Championship Fischer Random match against Magnus once, very convincingly. It was the most convincing defeat of Magnus's entire career, I would say, was the match with Wesley. But whoever won it, it was not at classical time controls, right? It was some kind of a rapid thing. So to me, in classical Fischer Random chess, and I'm not trying to be wrong or weird or anything, but this is just my sense that I could be totally wrong about. But I think there isn't currently a classical world champion in Fischer Random chess. I also think there's not currently a world champion in chess because Ding and Nepo drew the match. And I think it's okay to sometimes have no champion. I think you often have no champion, right? I don't think Magnus beat Fabi or Sergey either. So we've had many, many years without a real world champion. That's just my take on it. Now, this tournament is not even claiming to be the World Championship tournament, just like a really awesome tournament. And it doesn't have to be the World Championship to be the greatest tournament of the year. I think it's awesome, regardless of whether or not it's a World Championship. If it wanted to be a World Championship, I think it would need to have, a qualification cycle and so forth. I think they're definitely right to call it, a GOAT challenge or a challenge. A bit presumptuous for him to call himself the GOAT when he's really not demonstrated anything near the level of dominance that Morphy, Kasparov, and especially Philidor demonstrated during their eras. But to call it a challenge instead of a world championship makes sense to me, right? Because it doesn't have a whole qualifying cycle. Just because other people call him the GOAT doesn't mean that he should call himself the GOAT, right? Because he should be more aware of those other people of chess history. Like Magnus should know how much more Philidor did for the game, right? Like he should have more perspective and understand, like, chess fans can be uninformed. I'd be happy never to see Hikaru playing in any tournament. Oh, I don't care if he plays or doesn't play that much, Michiko. Up to each player to find their happiness in this world. Hikaru's played quite well in the last couple of years, so I would say it makes tournaments mildly more interesting to have him in them. I think most people nowadays are too stupid to know what greatest of all time means, unfortunately, Jake. I don't know if it's like a semantic argument, but to my mind, the greatest of all time, first of all, there could only be one. People often talk about multiple GOATs, which makes, you could call it semantic, but sure, it's semantic. It's also like very clear that there should only be one. And for Magnus to recognize Kasparov as being greater than him because he dominated a similar amount as Magnus, but for almost twice as long, makes a lot of sense. There are multiple goats in goat yoga. I concede and agree. That's certainly exciting. Maggie took on b2 after quite a bit of thought, and so the king came out, and he doesn't win the exchange. Instead, we get this weird endgame that they keep fighting, sputtering tactics all over the place. The king wandering around trying not to drop any heavy material, and Magnus gambling a little bit that he's going to come out with more here than the exchange he could have had. Thank you for the raid, Kantana. And welcome, dear viewers. Kantana, I'm afraid I don't know your channel yet, so feel free to give us some kind of a description blurb advertisement for your channel so that our viewers can decide if they're inclined to click on this little link here to follow your channel. And to those just joining us, we're currently watching a tournament called the Goat Chess Challenge, or Freestyle Goat Chess, or Freestyle Goat Challenge, or something of that sort. It's perhaps the best tournament of the year. You can see that the players we're watching right now are Gukesh and Magnus Carlsen, two of my favorites. We've got other good players in the wings too, like Firouzja Alireza and Fabiano Caruana over here. And they're playing Chess 960. And today and tomorrow they're playing Rapid Chess. And then after that, they'll be playing Classical Chess, time controls, but still Fischer 960 randomized positions to start. Absolutely the most excitement you could ever find watching top players, I think. So I recommend you stick around for a few minutes and see what you think of it. Welcome all. My name's David, by the way. I'm one of 3 chess teachers running this channel here. Anna Cantane. Up and coming streamer. WIM and a wonderful person. Oh, a wonderful person. That's great. This tournament's far more interesting than the candidates, which will be a draw fest by comparison and won't have Magnus or Ding. Well, right now, Ding's not adding too much to this tournament, unfortunately. But yeah, 960 is definitely best for super GM level chess to reduce the draws. Shivam thinks that Maggie missed the move e6 a few moves ago in this position here. So what would he have been expecting? The knight to retreat? And then he gets to just take this pawn and clean up from there with threats of bishop h5 and bishop d3. So e6. And now here he didn't take on c3. He still had the opportunity to take on c3. And now it's gone. So now he goes bishop g4, trying to get at this pawn and this knight. Rook e5. He can't sack an exchange with bishop e6, rook g5 check, can he? That's check back at him. But if he takes on e5, then the king defends the e6 pawn. I think he wants to play a move like rook g6 here, probably, right? And the rook can snack stuff, but it's going to lose the knight if the rook starts snacking too soon, I think. If you go rook g6, rook here. He's played rook g6. Rook d5, hoping to mess with him with knight f6 check. Yeah, that's got to be dealt with. Rook b5 does attack the knight on b2, but it's still very risky. Very, very risky to give up e6 and d7. And the king is very, very close to checkmate in those positions. You got to keep the knight on d2 defended. Very, very risky. This move was resourceful. I think the king might need to move to avoid knight f6. And then white could play knight c5, right? If black needs a move for king h8 or something. The battle is on. Magnus is still technically down a pawn. He's got great chances of recovering his pawn, but he was gambling for more. He definitely thought that he was going to come out winning somehow, I think. The candidates will be a decent tournament too, pass pawn. I'm not going to claim it's going to be boring or anything like that, but this is going to have more exciting games, more chess content. King G7 was just played. The other tournament that's going to be the greatest tournament of the year is the Olympiad. Olympiads are great too. To see the same players play against each other is no fun for Devo. Yeah, so Devo, what this changes about it is you've got some of the same players, but since they can't play their opening preparation and the opening lines they know, you get positions that are new to them. So it's the same players, but in new positions. And it's dramatic. Magnus definitely didn't want to trade queens, but White's queen was on c6, really in his face. He didn't have much room to avoid that queen trade. But he could have taken the exchange, and I don't think the knight and pawns would have been as good as the rook. He would have been considerably better, I think, if he took the exchange here, right? Trade queens, take the exchange. Technically, it's a knight and 3 pawns against a rook, which is a lot, but the bishop's a better long-range piece than the knight in that endgame. The rook's a better piece than the knight in that endgame. The pawns are kind of messed up. So I think there are very, very good chances for him to come out ahead if he had simply taken the exchange. So he was definitely going for more when he tried to get this pawn. And now, Gukesh has dodged around very, very carefully and managed to, wow, and even 95 takes. He'll be able to take here with check. I thought he was going to c5. Yes, it's mostly classical, Falk. They have, here's the format. They have today and tomorrow rapid chess, a round robin. You play everybody once. That round robin is going to set who's the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth seeds, and then they play knockout matches at a classical time control. Quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals. And Magnus is stoked. He tweeted that he was stoked. I don't know why there hasn't been more talk about this tournament, months and months in advance. I only found out about it 5 weeks ago, but this is the chess tournament for the year. This is the big thing, the big news. Magnus is taken, and now thinking. I mean, bishop e6 sort of looks like the only move. Surely he doesn't want to trade one of these two pieces for a knight. In an endgame, these pieces are both so much better than a knight that there's almost kind of like a double attack that you have to get out of using the check. And king c5, I guess rook g5, knight f5, knight d3, check is at least playable for black, although really messy. We got to move. King d4. Okay, so he doesn't go after the b5 pawn because, I mean, these tactics, I can't tell at this speed whether or not they work out, right? I don't know what's going on. Actually, it looks like it doesn't work for black. So I'm not sure why he would have not put his king on the better square. But when they go this fast, I can't keep up with it calculation-wise. White's knights are both in the center on dark squares. It's looking very, very playable for Gukesh. I mean, I think right now Magnus has to consider that he's down a pawn and scrambling to save the game, right? Abdul can see faster than me. Abdul says that if the king went here, Magnus would just go knight a4 immediately to grab this pawn. Maybe. Yeah, the quality is definitely uneven today, Falk, but I mean, Chess 960 is difficult, and then you're playing it rapid. Of course, it's going to be uneven. I hope the quality will be very, very good, but with noticeable mistakes. That's what I expect in the classical. Like, enough mistakes to have more decisive games, but not mistakes like Ding versus Fabi or anything. We just cast our eyes over to how Firouzja's doing against Fabi. Seemingly no progress for a while. Managed A5. He's going to take D5 from him? No, he doesn't. Why doesn't he take D5? What? Can somebody tell me? Queen takes D5. What's going on? Oh my god, I've got to guess. I've got to guess that it was here. Check. Here. Takes. 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 And these pieces are too far away. That's my guess. The knight can come this way, and then he brings this. Stopping perpetual. That's my guess, folks. But okay, we're just gonna keep blazing along. 93 was played. Takes. Bishop G7. What's he preparing for? To sack the knight on D4 or something? This is their live position. Firouzja's got 9.5 minutes, so he's like not. He's not only defended resiliently, but he hasn't even played as if he was under brutal pressure here. That's amazing. Thing is, he's always just down a piece. I think he's always losing. Pretty much. But okay, knight D5 is obvious. And then what's the issue? B4 knight here. What you don't want is this knight to get near your king. Over here, bishop A2, getting rid of the outside passer, trapping the bishop. If rook A5, what was Maggie even planning? Rook D6 check. And then knight takes C3, I think. It's just, who knows? Hits the knight from behind. Hits the rook. These pieces are tangled up, but he has equalized the material now. In fact, he's up a pawn until white takes it. White takes it. Material's equal. Pushes the king back. Going for this again. Maybe rook D5, but then he could go rook A6. He doesn't have to trade rooks. His pieces are really oddly sidelined. No rook D5. So the knight can get out. Knight C3. Rook A3 is possible. Knight C3 played. Gukesh is completely out of time here. It's weird that Ali Reza has 9 minutes while they're blitzing, but Ali Reza's played 68 moves. They've played 38. So 30 extra moves times 10 seconds is 5 extra minutes on your clock at least, and then they've each played 30 moves. And Ali Reza has more of the time than Fabi. Rook A3. Piece is still blundering about. That bishop is not looking good, but he's got knight D1, bishop B1 at least to keep the tangle of variations going a little bit longer as needed. Does he have anything else, Maggie, here? Nothing much. His clock ticks down. These two are under the gun. I don't see any other option. He's played knight D1. But he spent all his time looking for some other option. C5. Oh my god. The rook has to cover D1. Who thinks Magnus is losing? Instinctively, he's probably losing, right? There goes the C pawn while the pieces are tangled. Bishop covers the queening square. And now he's only got one knight to extricate through B2. He's got the pawn maybe under control. The bishop came to life. It came back to life. For 1.5 seconds there, I thought Magnus might be losing. C7 played. Interesting. Knight B2. Rook C3? What was knight B2? I guess I'd go bishop C8 then, huh? Oh, God. Gukesh still going after that poor knight. It's just abusive. It is just abusive. If he went for like rook A8, black has rook C5. And if he goes for rook to C3 or something, black has bishop C8. So he's trying to win a piece with this pawn. But it's hard to find it. Knight could go to D3 here even as an option, but it just goes back to D1. Trying C3. Rook C2! It occurred to me for a second. I was like, no, the bishop's covering that square. Oh my God, that looks like a winning... No, the bishop just comes back. Still going. Knight D3 or something? Can he cut off the knight with his knights? Oh. He's still not threatening king D1 because the rook would take on D3. It wouldn't even be remotely good. So he's not threatening anything obvious yet. It's what is going on in this game. That knight is really struggling though. I mean, you know, it's got nowhere to go yet. I guess the threat is this other knight coming to E5 and then trying to take it. King F6 played. Gukesh is white. Magnus Carlsen is black. Rook C1 going after the knight. If it goes to B2, knight can take it. Does that black have bishop A6? No. Magnus finds the E pawn. That's some counterplay right there. Gukesh running low on time. I thought knight FE5 looked really good before, but he went for rook C1. He takes it. The knight tries to get out. Holy moly. I guess he can play knight takes B2, but it's probably not enough to win. It's enough to not lose. Ooh, if king E6, he's got knight F4, king E5, knight D5, king D5, rook F8 winning. So the king has to dodge that. He can go rook F7 to H7 maybe. He finds some other move, knight C6. The knights are still tangled up, but they're still fighting. King D6, he's got rook F6. Oh my God, it happens. No, the pawn's gone. No, not my pawn. He wants to take on B2 at the end of this. He does. Now, can he safely re-untangle those knights and stay up a piece? Probably. Probably. They're hard to trap on an open board. They've got a lot of squares. The one on B2 is pretty awkward right now, but they're also like, they're covering squares, and there's tactics against the black king as well. Bishop B7, so if knight E7, rook E5, so knight B4 is the most likely square to escape on. He plays it. Now the knights can sort of like connect and defend each other a little bit as needed. Rook H5. He also needs to keep this pawn on G3. He needs to untangle the knights and not lose that pawn. We'd expect knight from B2 to D3, but it goes to C4, more aggressive, preparing rook F7, starting to attack the black king directly. He's going to give the check, sends the king back. He can go rook G7 or something more aggressive like knight D6. He goes for the more aggressive move. The bishop's starting to run low on places to hide from the attack. Is knight A6 checkmate here? Not quite. Knight A6 and then knight B5 maybe? Yeah, he goes for it. That does look a lot like checkmate. And Magnus resigns. Gukesh has toppled the champion. He's not currently the world champion or whatever. Anyway, Gukesh has toppled the greatest player. Whew. After losing in the first round himself to Firouzja, who is only able to draw the game. What? No more moves? No, there must be more moves. Queen B5. I'm impressed that Firouzja did not lose this game to Fabi. Very impressed. You're proud, Chess on Earth? Gukesh is phenomenal. This is not the last moment that'll make you proud if you root for people based on what country they're from. In this game here, Abdul? Well, I mean, like, Gukesh is not the best he's going to be yet, right? He's still improving. Same for Prague. Same for Arjun. Same for Nihal, although I don't think Nihal will be world champion, but... Oh, yeah, I was wondering about queen takes d5 here, yeah. Yeah. Everybody's got to love these guys, right? They're amazing. Nihal could become the world blitz champion. That's true. There's all kinds of different champions. Hey, PB. PJ. Queen takes d5. Right, so here you're saying queen takes d5. And you thought c takes b. C takes b for who? It's black's move if white takes on d5. B takes c instead of queen and 1. But I won with my move. Why do we need a different move for black? If white avoided this line and my line was winning. But okay, you want to do this. White has to take back. Then you're going to give check, I'm guessing. And take here. And here. And here. And you're also winning with your variation, right? You won a game in 9 moves. Well, that's fun, Rambini. More clear. You're right. You don't need to calculate as far to see that this is good for black. That's true. This is much easier than my line. But he played 93, and why didn't he lose? Oh yeah, brilliant moves are good. But you know, Rambini, the whole chess.com, like, accuracy, brilliancy, good move, bad move, all that stuff, you know, it's like just like a window painting. It's not, it's just like made up as something for people to engage with. It's just for like content, you know, it's not real. Yeah, okay. Like, you should feel good when you play well, but you can't use chess.com's computer artificial intelligence, blah, 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 to tell you when you played well or not. You know, that's up to you to look over the game yourself and decide if it was good or not. I bet they have, Freddie. I bet they have. All right. So I'm going to have to go pick up my kids now. But there's going to be another round today to this event here. So let me share with you all a link for watching the games, because they're going to have round 3. I don't know exactly when, but maybe in like half an hour or something like that. So far, let's see. Noterbeck won against Ding. Kamer beat Aronian. And Gukesh beat Magnus. So I think Noderbeck and Vincent each have 1.5 at this point, and so does Firouzja. And so does Fabi. Yeah. So we've got like half the field with 1.5 out of 2. Nobody's really ahead yet, so to speak. There's one player with 0 points, yeah. Very aggressive opening from Noderbeck. And quickly consolidates a huge advantage in the center. And he's winning by move 10. Ding literally couldn't get to move 10 without losing the game. Whew. That hurts, man. That hurts. Oh, man. All right, guys, let's send a raid somewhere. If anyone's got a suggestion, let me know where. Oh, Ali Reza's brother is watching his games in the tournament. That would be like a great channel to raid, right? Let's go over there. Oh, the other thing I wanted to send you all was like the link to the tournament, just in case anyone wanted to follow on their own. Okay, folks, so here's a link in chat to the event so you can follow the games. I've got a lot going on this weekend with my family, but whenever I can, I'll try and pop in and make some comments about this. And don't forget that we have a tournament tomorrow. Cartier and I will be doing coverage. We've got a tournament tomorrow. I'll cover a lot of this tournament next week, Falk. Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Yes. I didn't even do my own chess training today because the tournament started. So I'll see you all again soon. Have a great day.